Hey everybody. It's episode I think 4. Nah, I don't know. Maybe 3. So there's one thing I've already quickly learned doing these diary entries, and that's I've started looking forward to them a bit more. Like today my mind was just racing about like all the things I wanted to say out loud. Um and so for those of you who don't know, I just spent the last, or you didn't watch the last episode, I spent the last 5 or 6 days in an immersive Dutch school where I was learning how to speak Dutch. I thought about coming into this with like speaking some Dutch to you guys, but we'll work our way there. And also like 99% of you wouldn't understand what I'm saying. But this week has been quite an eye-opener for me. I mean, putting yourself in like such a uncomfortable position as an American who's, unilingual. I don't even know my own language. And I really do feel like there's a stigma in America, at least where I grew up, where people don't really try very hard to learn languages. And so there was like a lot of stuff that came out this week. Insecurities, hesitations, self-doubts, surprising myself, like positive things too. It was a very positive experience overall, but it was glaring. It's like one of those things where, it was a big rock that I was overturning this rock and seeing what was underneath there, attempting to learn a new language. And one of the highlights is that I learned how to roll my R's. So like to say learn is lire. You're not supposed to say the R that loud, but I could never roll my R's. So for me, it takes a lot of effort, and we're getting there. As I say it more and more, it takes less effort, so I don't have to do it, but that was pretty exciting. I literally had given up on rolling my R's for my entire life, so there's one thing I have to show for it in English. I could randomly roll my R's in a word if I felt like it. So let's get to the point. Let's get down to the nitty gritty, the brass tacks here. I'm going to use all my, whatever you call those in English. Not alliteration. That's horrible. Okay, well, all the English majors and probably any English speaker that's not me probably knows what I'm talking about. Whatever you call it, brass tacks. Or like over the moon, stuff like that, or once in a blue moon. There's a word for these. We're gonna get down to it. So, God, I really want that word. So a little bit of context. I know I said I was writing these for explaining to myself, but I also want to keep you guys up to date. I have a lovely friend named Andrew, and he, a while back, I've known him for a few years now. He talked to me about the idea, like this kind of like theory. I'm now using my own words about it. These aren't verbatim. You know how they say there's 2 types of people, this and this, right? It's kind of like there's 2 types of ways to think about things. Each individual topic, not like things as a whole, but each individual topic. And that's in extremes and with nuance. That's like the 2 ways you can think about things. And pretty much every single time that I'm not seeing clearly about any issue ever, and I also feel like when I'm listening to somebody else talk about an issue, it's the same way. They're thinking in extremes, or I'm thinking in extremes. What I mean is a perfect example is one extreme is to never go to the gym. Another extreme is to go from never going to the gym to 6 to 7 days a week. When in reality, there's somewhere in the middle that's just right for you at that moment. That's like a very literal example. And without like mindfulness, without consciously considering your options and thinking about these things and being really aware of how these things affect you, it's quite easy to kind of fall into this slippery slope of thinking in extremes. And simply being aware of when I'm doing it, when I'm thinking in extremes. I'm being closed-minded. I'm not really considering my options, looking at the bigger picture in a given situation. Just simple awareness that I'm doing that has been one of the most like powerful lessons I've learned in the last probably my entire life, actually. So shout out to Andrew. I really do think it's something that can be applied to almost every, if not every, kind of problem you're going through at any given moment. Just asking yourself, am I thinking in extremes here? And it's often due to trauma or like negative experiences. The word trauma, when I use it, I mean just things that happen to you that are bad, that have affected you. It doesn't have to be like somebody died in front of you type of trauma. I think trauma is kind of like a buzzword sometimes that a lot of people mean different things when they say trauma. So when I say trauma, I just mean something that negatively impacted you based on your experiences. So with that in mind, the extreme that came to my mind this week, it was a topic that really got dug up by the fact that I was doing Dutch school, but I was also considering it before I went to this week, was the extreme of responsibility and accountability. So I feel like on one extreme, you have people with victim complex who take zero blame for what they're like, zero responsibility, zero blame, zero accountability for their actions. And it's always somebody else, something else's fault. And then on the other side, you kind of have like people pleasers, pushovers, the self-doubters that they will almost always beat themselves up and they will almost always take responsibility for things, even when it's not their thing to take responsibility for. And in the middle is a theoretical perfect always. Usually the theoretical perfect's impossible, but it's also not the same for everybody, But the theoretical perfect would be to take accountability when it is something for you to change or to do something about, and to basically not be too hard on yourself, or to kind of like be stoic and let it go if it's something that is not within your control, right? That's like the nuanced middle thinking that I'm always striving for in any example. So the extremes that came up are the victim complex over here, and I'm just gonna say the pushover people pleaser complex over here. Anxious attachment, this type of stuff. Please don't take it offensively. I'm not using probably scientifically correct words here. But this was something I realized when I look back on my life. So first off, spoiler alert, I fall in the people pleaser pushover category. I 100% fall into that category without a doubt. And what's so interesting about this, because then I kind of considered all of my streaming career. People said I never really took responsibility. I never took, I never had accountability for when we lost games. I always blame somebody else, blame my teammates. And then I started considering, why is this happening? Why do people have a different perspective on me than what I know is true? Right? Like, I know I take way too much responsibility. I know I am way too hard on myself. I get in my own head way too much. I overthink everything. So they're telling me I'm not taking any responsibility to fuck, So then I started realizing that this is almost an integer overflow problem. And by almost, I mean, in my head, it is integer overflow problem. What happens is that if you blame yourself so much and you take so much responsibility that's not yours to take, it's not like a good thing. I'm not saying like, oh, I'm so noble that I take so much responsibility. I'm not like idolizing, putting this concept on a pedestal. It's not good. It's not healthy. It doesn't help the other person because you enable people to do things a lot of the time that aren't good for them. And you also create toxic dynamics in relationships. It usually leads to like you expecting things from other people in return when they're not going to give it to you. Yada, yada, yada. Hopefully I didn't call too many of you out too much. So it's not a good thing. Right? So if I'm already so hard on myself, it creates a lot of insecurity, a lot of doubt, a lot of self-doubt. And what ends up happening is if somebody then attacks you, not like with a sword, but verbally, accosting you in a game of Dota, in real life, blaming you for something at work that you did wrong, like, and if you actually did something wrong, meaning like you could have done a better job, and somebody attacks you for it, the problem is when you messed up, you already were like, ah, shit, I fucking messed up, shit, and then they say that to you, and what's your only choice at this point? Not only choice, but what's the natural reaction that you get there? Ask yourself, if you're somebody like me, what happens when that happens? You get defensive, right? You get defensive because you're almost at this integer overflow state where the amount of blame you're taking is so much that your brain it just can't handle it anymore. It's like, oh shit, this is just too much. I feel so fucking shit for this situation, and I don't know how to get out of it. I'm super uncomfortable. I'm anxious. I'm worried what everyone's thinking about me, and this guy's telling me how shit I am. Overflow into the victim mindset, blame everybody else, blame something else, redirect the conversation to somebody else, something else. And that's what I did with streaming. I was so insecure, I was so in my own head that when my viewers or teammates in my games blamed me or called me out in a not so kind way, even sometimes probably in a kind way, I got defensive, and that makes me look like somebody who has a victim mindset. Clearly, just to be clear, I don't think one extreme is any better than the other. I could talk all day about what I think is wrong. Not wrong per se, it's a bad word, but what I think about the personality traits of people in each category. I obviously identify better with people on the, overly anxious overthinker side than the people on the victim side. I don't really truly understand why my brain would do that. But at the same time, maybe they did the integer overflow and just left it stuck there. Maybe that's actually what happened. I'm literally processing this in the moment, but all theory. So the reason I'm saying this is because back when I used to coach, I had a brand for, well, I still coach, but I'm saying back when I was coaching and started, I had a brand for kind of shitting on people. And people are like, I come in here and just tell me how bad I am, BSJ. Tell me, make me feel like shit. I think it was kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, positive feedback loop where more and more people came for that reason. It got more and more ridiculous almost. And I ended up just being that way towards every student with no nuance to how to teach them. Right. And the fact is, I think that when you have victim mindset and you're not taking enough responsibility, sometimes you need a fucking wake-up call. Like, hey, bro, yeah, like, I'm tired of hearing about all the other people and what they did wrong. What did you do wrong? What could you have done better? I'm tired of it. Like, that's almost the tone that I've had to take with people who do this, right? It's like, I can't, what else am I supposed to do? You're not even talking about what you're doing. How am I supposed to help you fix this if you're not even talking about your own thing? And you're coming to me for coaching. So I feel like I've had to have a very stern, almost like a drill sergeant type tone with people on the victim mindset side. While with the people on my side, not saying it's against each other, but the side that I fall into, that approach is horrible, right? For my perspective, like anybody who tries to coach me like that, I'm gonna crumble. I'm gonna straight up crumble. If you coached me the way that I coached other people like 5 years ago, I would crumble. My knees would shiver and just I'd be quaking in my boots, shaking in my boots, whatever. English, tough language after speaking Dutch for 5 days. So, yeah, it just made me realize so much, not only like the positive and negative dynamics of both sides, but also so much about coaching and learning and feeling it out for what the right type of approach to helping a loved one, coaching somebody. And so kind of asking yourself, hey, if you have a really close friend, if you have a partner, which one do you think they fall into? And this isn't like black and white, like you are victim mindset. It's like there's a middle point. maybe you fall a little bit over here in the victim mindset. Maybe you fall a little bit over here. It's not like if you're over here, you're over here. It's the same thing. You know, it's nuanced, right? So do they take a little bit too little responsibility? Do they take a little bit too much responsibility? Do they take way too much responsibility? And maybe considering that in your approach to talking to them about things they're doing that concern you. For me, it's been highly impactful reflecting on how I've been taught and the people that have helped me and kind of trying to figure out why that's working and why it's been such a different result. And my teacher this week, she was very sweet. I had like multiple teachers, but I had like one primary teacher. She was a very sweet woman. She just kind of told me how obvious it was that I was in my head all the time. And it was just this look of like genuine worry for me that like, wow, you seem to be doing a really good job, like learning this. Why are you so nervous and worried and overthinking about everything? And not like in a way of what's wrong with you, but just like, oh, that sucks that like you're doing that. And it was like very supportive. And over the course of the week, I just slowly but surely gathered this confidence from people around me that in theory, I should have for myself. Like, in theory, I shouldn't need them doing that for me. But that's not how it works. I'm not saying, like, there's something wrong with me, because I do. In theory, that would be ideal, right? That we never needed anybody else's help. So my idea is that, like, I want to be as close to taking the right amount of responsibility without any outside help, but knowing that I need supportive, helpful teachers, loved ones around me to kind of boost me to the right position. So then I know it's also partially my responsibility to surround myself with the right people. Which is, some would say obvious, but I think if you're anything like me, you didn't give enough credit to, in your past at least, or maybe you still don't, give enough credit to just how much impact every single person that's around you has on you. And your mental state and your ability to learn and grow and feel comfortable and all that. So yeah, another long episode, I think. What are we at? 17 minutes? Last one was like 33, so not nearly as bad. But just so much thinking about how it felt to be taught this week, really seeing this like transformation within myself. I went from being super nervous, super self-conscious about ever trying to speak Dutch to my girlfriend and I went and got coffee this morning. I went and got a haircut. These people are in hospitality, so maybe it's a bit of a, poor sample size to be based off of. But, I said, I would like to practice. I say, ik leer nog Nederlands spreken. Maar wil ik... I think I said speak in English, so maar ik nu Engels spreken. So it's like, I'm still learning Dutch, but for now, I'll speak in English. And I said that to I actually said it well, because I was like mentally prepared for it. I'm still very bad at going from one to the other. It's funny. I feel like I'm defending myself, but it's hilarious because when I'm in Dutch mode, I'm like, oh, it actually kind of rolls off the tongue. But like when I'm in English mode, oh man, it's bad. But yeah, he understood me. And then he asked me in Dutch, would you like me to still speak Dutch? And I was like, yeah, bedankt. And then it was so cool. It was just so fucking cool. He spoke to me in Dutch. He asked me for my order, normal things. Would you like something to eat? Because I was getting coffee. And I understood it all. I was like, holy shit, I understood all that. And I responded like, or like he asked if I wanted something to eat, and I said, nee bedankt again. Like, there's a lot of like, or nee, dankjewel. But it was just such, for me, this probably sounds like such a everyday experience for anyone who's spoken multiple languages, but for me, it really was like, I like my girlfriend started to talk to me about what we were previously talking about before we ordered our food. And I was just like, okay, stop for a second. Like, I'm not trying to be rude. Just stop for a second. I just need to take this in. Like, holy shit, that just happened. It was it was transformative. It was a transformative experience. Like, that just happened. And man, it felt so powerful. You know, there's moments where, yeah, oh man, there were just moments today where, you know, I had like a 75% conversation with my hair cutter guy, hair barber, in English, but then we're back and forth Dutch things, and it's funny when he asked me a question in English and I know how I would respond in Dutch. I responded in Dutch, and you know, I asked him if it annoyed him or if it's annoying. I'm like, head is vervalent? And he's like, nah, it's good. But yeah, I mean, it was just so cool. And I felt very empowered. I was asking about certain things and when to say them. So one more conversation for the week, because why the fuck not? I have so much. I mean, my brain is this whole week it's been doing that, but today it's kind of like processing everything that it's been trying to keep up with all week. So man, how much context do I give? I have this analogy for Factorio where, and this applies for me for life, where what happens is you start level 1 and you're trying to get level 2 and you're trying to get to level 3, but the way Factorio works is when you get to level 3, you're building upon level 1 and 2. You know, you're utilizing what foundation you put in level 1 and 2 to build level 3. And what usually ends up happening in Factorio, not usually, it always ends up happening in Factorio, is at level 6, something goes wrong and you're unable to overcome it. And it's the reason you're unable to overcome it is because of something you needed to do differently in level 1. Like, the foundation that set you up had some sort of band-aid fix along the way that, you know, there's no way on level 1 that you knew to prepare for what would happen at level 6. So the life lesson I learned from this in so many different examples was when I'm at level 6, theoretically, that usually I have to rewind to level 1 and rebuild from the ground up with what I learned and know to get to level 6, such that I don't run into that hard stopping point, the traffic jam, per se, at level 6 again. So it's like, if I make it to level 6, the only way to make it to level 7, if I'm stuck at level 6, is to actually rewind all the way to level 1 and carefully work my way back to level 6 and then go to level 7. And that happens a lot in real life. And so what was so interesting to me, I had to give that context, because now after this week, I was thinking about everything in terms of languages and the way that I was doing language, or doing language, whatever. At one point, I tried to ask, what does that mean in English? Like, what is this specific word? What is this word's equivalent in English? And she said, well, sometimes it's for, and sometimes it's of, and sometimes, you know, it's like, basically there was no direct correlation to what this word would mean in English, because it had like effectively 4 different words it could mean in English based on the context of the situation and when you use it in the sentence. And so trying to explain to an English speaker using English what this word meant, just, it will never work, right? And this immediately made my brain spiral. Like, people say that kind of shit to you all the time, that there's no literal translation for that word. But it made my brain spiral into Factorio mode. And I realized that why Dutch was so hard, on top of like why, you know, learning a language is difficult enough already, is because what's my native language, right? In English. What happens in English? I see something, an experience happens, somebody says something to me, and my brain just knows what to say, right? It just says like, oh, I see that, or like, oh yeah, like, respond. And in Dutch, what I was doing, I didn't even realize this. I didn't even consciously realize it until like 2 days ago. Is that somebody would say something to me, or I would see something, I would think, what is that in English? And then I would translate in my head to Dutch. And that worked for so much amount of time. And what I mean by it worked was I was able to construct some sentences here and there. and make some observations. But it's kind of like playing with 200 ping. You know, it's like your action comes 200th of a second later because your brain is taking an extra step to get there. So not only does it slow down the process, but eventually that flawed way of methodology is not going to work anymore. And then what I realized was that I need to mimic English. Like, oh my god, my vacuum's trying to go. Stop it, vacuum. It's gonna disrupt us. But I need to recreate the environment that I had in English, like the way I formulate sentences in English, to Dutch. I need to recreate it from the ground up, rather than trying to go to level 7 in English and then go back to level 1 in Dutch, which is what I'm doing. It's like, I just need to rebuild from level 1, thinking about the very basic. What do you do in English? You see something, you learn what to say, like you learn from your teacher, you learn from your parents what you're supposed to say there, or like the appropriate general thing to say, and then you say it. With the whole entire goal of language for you to be able to express yourself and for them to understand you. That is the entire purpose of a language. And I was just like, well, and then my eyes were just open. I was like, holy shit, I'm just gonna think, if this were to happen to me, what would I want to say here? Like, what would Dutch Brian want to say about this? So, like, a perfect example was, I was talking to my hair barber, and he talked about going to New York, and he said it was really expensive. And in my head, I was like, I don't know how, in like a witty, snappy way, that I would respond in Dutch to say, yeah, it's the most expensive. Like, the most expensive. Like, if somebody said this to me in English, they'd say, you know, New York's really expensive. And I'd be like, yeah, the most expensive. And, you know, I asked him, I'm like, how would you kind of express that in Dutch? Like, you know, what would be the terminology? And he's just like, een van de duurste. Een van de duurste. I had to think about it because I'm also een van de duurste. Which duur is expensive, and whenever you put sta at the end of something, it's the most. So duurste means the most expensive. So one of the most expensive, or it is one of the most expensive, is how they would say it in Dutch. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. I can use that for anything. So like if somebody says, wow, they're pretty great, like that person's pretty great, or this food is pretty great, I can just be like, yeah, een van the beste. I mean, goedste would technically work, but I think they use beste. You get the point. The point is, anytime I want to say the equivalent of like, yeah, one of the best, or like, yeah, it's the best, or yeah, it's the most expensive, or yeah, it's the cheapest, or yeah, it's the most delicious, I have a phrase for that. And I was just like, wow, that makes so much more sense to me rather than trying to translate it from English. It's like more like when somebody says something, I would then respond with this. So it's a situation and a response rather than translate to English back to Dutch. And that felt like riveting shit. I was just like, wow, this is mind-boggling. This is going to be so useful, yada, yada, yada. So, you know, back to level 1. I have to understand level 1 of English for me to be able to get past level 1 of Dutch, is if I want to do it faster. Which it actually immediately sped up the way I'm learning. Immediately sped up. Because I can get to level 7 of Dutch utilizing, if I critically think about the levels of English. You know, this is all theory at the end of the day. But yeah. Been quite a crazy week. Coming up, I'm going to Singapore literally in like 6 hours. That's why I'm recording this today. I was probably going to record it anyway today. But I leave for Singapore in 6 hours to go for Alienware, Team Liquid related product testing stuff. That's about all I can share. So life continues to be busy. I'll be back next Thursday. I'll be back streaming the Monday after, which is like the 28th. And yeah, that's what we've got going on now. So more life lessons to be learned. Fortunately, the guy I'm traveling with is Dutch, so hopefully I'll get to practice. Ik wil ik wil oefenen. I want to practice. So yeah, guys, I will see you then when I get back. Thanks for tuning in, and for future Brian, if you ever watch this, thanks for watching yourself talk in the past. Bye bye.